I've seen a lot. Amid the celebrity allure of entrepreneurship, many exceptional entrepreneurs remain shadowed. Here, I team up with these hidden talents to unveil their challenges and successes. Dive in with me to unearth entrepreneurial gems, learn from our experiences, and get educated.
Here's what's weird, because I do recall not that exact story or that exact time, but when I'm looking at the timeline, you talked earlier about, well, take some courses. Courses will lead to conferences. Conferences lead to meetings, to boards, to this, to that. And it's a stacking effect. It elevates our thinking, elevates the way we do things, elevates our experience, our practice, all that kind of stuff. But you're well down that road. I mean, we met in 08, I think it was, or 09. And so you're well down the road of lots of, emotional, psychological, business strategy, development, training and coaching and all that stuff. What led to that, and what was the process to get yourself out of it?
The person who could grow a $10 million year business was not the same person who could grow a $30 million year business or grow to a $30 million year business. And so I either had to go sell to that person, find that person, or become that person. Because even though I was well down the road, it had got me to there. But the limiting beliefs that I had about myself and the business, I mean, even the language, if you think about what I said, I can't be the guy who's going to do this. Well, that was the language. That wasn't just language. That was my belief. Your language is your belief. And so I had to overcome that mindset. And so when you say what has been the most important thing, I would say that type of thing has happened all along the way, right? At the time I had, I don't know, probably 150 employees maybe at the time. And now we have 400. Well, the guy who runs 150 employees can't run 400. He doesn't know how. So either you have to find the guy who knows how to run 400, or you got to become the guy who knows how to run 400. And I would guess anybody who's done that would say that, I would think, would probably say a similar kind of thing. You had to become a different person. I was very comfortable, as a medical director of an ER, I was very comfortable taking care of 30, 40 people. But that wasn't the same as 100 people, and that wasn't the same as 200 people. And so I had to grow into a different me in order to do that. And it's true. Had I sold the company to somebody better than me, it would have grown faster. And I don't mean better in skill set. I mean better in thinking about the way things should be. It's not a skill set. The skill set's learnable. We can all learn the same. Look, if you and I talk about what is the most important thing growing any business, and let's assume we say it's sales. You're really good at sales, right? How much more could you possibly learn? I mean, you're right here. There's always more, but you're about here. Learning that much more isn't going to take you to 200 million.
Yeah, I don't have 90% more to learn.
Exactly. So it's not
definitely more to learn.
And you always will, but it's not the skill set. That's not the problem. The problem is your limiting beliefs about what you can and can't do. And that's why if I replaced you with somebody better, it would grow faster. If I replaced me with somebody better, it would grow faster.
Well, I think that's why that's why the private equity model works so well, right? Yep. Because they have a skill set or the mindset. I mean, they do have, there is some skill sets. Like when you talk about like strategy and accounting and understanding of, the financing, I guess maybe it'd be financing, which is really, people think that's skill, but it's actually more mental.
Well, and you get to a level where capital becomes important because they're up to a certain level, you can grow. If you get above a certain level, capital becomes more important, right? It's hard to grow from 100 million to $1 billion with no capital, for example. Right. So capital becomes important. It's not important when you're beginning and you get to up to 5, 10 million, but it becomes more important as time goes on. But that's also just a skill set you have to learn.
It's a skill, but it's a skill set. But as you were just talking about,
it's a mindset and a skill set.
It's a mindset.
Well, the skill set comes because you develop a mindset that you can. And one of the things you said without even realizing it was very important. You bring in a capital partner, and they have a certain skill set, not he. they bring a team with a group of skill sets, right? But it's not one guy. That's the same thing. Same thing. How big is that capital partner group? Probably about as big as the owner thinks it can be. Why isn't he 10 times bigger, like his competition? For the same reason. And he's a capital partner guy. So it's the same game, right? The reason Elon Musk is so big is he just doesn't have the ability to think he can't do something. I mean, seriously.
No, it's
the
true.
difference between him and I is he just has huge balls. That's it. That's all it is. You know what? The world needs internet. What if we just shoot up a bunch of satellites in the air and just give everybody free internet? Sure, Elon.
Yeah, that's not a skill. That's all thinking. I would be like, I would never think of that. I'd never think big enough.
Simultaneously, let's just go to Mars while we're at it and build electric cars throughout the world with charging stations at the same time, by the way, and then create a company. You know, the problem with cities is they're 3D. So all the people are up and down, but the roads are like this. Let's build a company that builds layers of roads and call it the Boring Company. While we're doing all these other things.
And who's going to do all the work?
What skill set did he have to do that?
No,
it's not skill.
Yeah.
He just has no.
And then he takes it to the next level with all the robots, the AI robots that he's building. It's like,
and putting
who's going to
in your brain?
Who's going to do all this work? We're going to build robots to do it.
Because one of the things that happens is if you said to me, "Hey, let's put satellites up," and I'd be, man, that's a cool idea, but obviously we can't do that. You know, obviously that would take, and we'll start thinking of all the reasons it can't be done. And he just doesn't have the ability to think of the reasons it can't be done. So people just do it. It's weird.
It's true.
It's so weird.
And I do think, and this is this is like a self-admission here. Whereas when you were just talking, and maybe I'm not sure I've actually really thought about it in this term before, but when you were talking about, capital, it was like sometimes from the mental side of it. I mean, there is some strategy and tactics about getting capital.
No question about marketing, about HR, about all those things.
Yeah. But having the feeling of being worthy enough of the capital is also the mental side.
For sure. I remember the first time that I went and got capital, or I've never went and got capital in the way you're talking about. I remember the first time I started hanging around investment bankers and capital partner dudes. And I was like a kid in a candy shop. I was kind of in awe of all the stuff they do. Well, that tells you I wasn't ready. They're not in awe. That's just a job. It's just money, right? And so that showed you where I was at in the game. The first time I wrote a check for $1 million, I was like, my hands were sweating. I'm like, it's $1 million. Now I've done it so many times, it's not even, it's just a thing. It's just what you do. I mean, we're doing that every month, right? So, but the first time, I wanted to frame it, take pictures with it, do all that stuff. Look at all these zeros on here. This is crazy, but that's where you are. The million didn't change. It's still the same million now. But the only thing that changed is me. My mindset about $1 million. $1 million is a nice starting point.
No,
for real though.
But
in the beginning, that was the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal was to be able to write $1 million check. And so $1 million didn't change. I changed.
Just to circle back to this, like, you can either hire, you'd said, person to go from 10 million to 30 million. And I liked how you frame it, because the three options were hire it, sell the business, or become that person. And I'm just kind of curious, for those people, and I would also argue, or it's not argue, but make the statement of, if you're a business owner, okay, yes, we're talking about the number 10 million, but the number could be 1 million flipping to 3 million.
It was at one point
3 million moving to 10 million or 5 million. Yeah, it's the same
or
conversation.
100,000 going to $1 million.
Right.
Same discussion.
Yeah. And sometimes that one is
the hardest.
Kind of the hardest.
Well, because you're the least knowledgeable. You're the least skilled. You're the least wisdomous. You're the least experienced.
You feel the least worthy.
You are. And you're right.
And you don't want to but you don't want to ask for help, and you think you got to do it all on
You're
your
still
own.
the guy in the closet trying to get your finances done.
Yeah, and you don't want to you don't want to be embarrassed.
So I think you just brought up another huge point. If you were to ask me again and say, what is one thing you learned? I think one of the things both you and I learned together is your financials are not personal. The more people look at them, probably the better you're going to do. Don't go hide them. Don't say, oh, nobody gets to see my financials. Show them they're just numbers. Nobody gives a crap. And the more people that look at them, the more good ideas you get about what to do with them. But in the beginning, because somehow we grew up as men and women thinking, you know what, when I do my personal finance, I go in my closet and, nobody gets to see how much we make. Who taught us that? I mean, honestly, show it to everybody. What I've learned is the more people who look at my financials, personal and business, the better I end up doing.
Yeah, 100%. It's funny. I have a buddy of mine. I won't mention his name, but he's selling a very expensive piece of property, and he listed it, and I believe he listed it for $1 because he didn't want to put on the listing how much the property was worth. And I've said to him before in the past, like, nobody gives a fuck. Nobody cares what you're worth, man. And to be honest with you, the fact that you list it for that low, more people see it because
of course they're all looking at the dollar now.
Well, now they're looking at $1. It's like, oh, maybe I could get this, and then they look at the pictures, and then they go, well, I wonder what
Who's
that's
the idiot
worth.
with the dollar?
And then, or they ask like, well, I wonder what that's worth. And now they're talking about the number more rather than you just put the number out and then they forget about it. And
I can't afford that and they move on to the next thing.
Exactly. Or the people who aren't in that market aren't looking at it because they're just like, well, I can't afford that kind of place. But anybody who is looking for a place between, let's just call it $1 million and under, it's way more than $1 million. But they're all now looking at it. And then they're like, oh, well, who owns that? And then it's like, doesn't take long to figure that out. So now people, it actually becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Yeah, you drew attention when you were trying not to get attention. And so, but I've heard from so many business people, and the best piece of advice, one of the best pieces of advice I ever got from my mentor at the time, his name was Harold Cunningham. He said, take your management team. At that time, I think I had 18 people. And he said, give them all a piece of paper and have them write on the piece of paper what they think you make. He goes, I guarantee you, every single one of them will be 10x more than what you actually make. And I don't even think it was 10, it was probably 20. Like some of these people, which made me question my own management team because they were literally writing down our gross revenue. Right. So they'd write like, I don't know, whatever, at the time it was 10 or 15 million or whatever it was in total revenue. And they were writing like, oh, I'm making 15 million a year. I'm like, oh, fuck, 15 million a year. Like this is back.
Good for you.
Well, you're like, no shit. But it's not a fraction of that.
No. Turns out we're negative 600 of the bottom line, but you know what?
Well,
the 15 million
yeah.
looks great. That's why none of us go around talking to each other about how big's your business. That's about 500,000. You only make 500? No, that's the net profit. We make 40 million.
we only talk
about the top line. Nobody wants to talk about the bottom line.
That's right. but it is true. Like I think to your point, that really realizing, like, letting people know and letting them in a little bit to understand, like, no, okay, guys, actually, this is not the case. Yeah.
It's been true for me and my team. I don't hide our financials from my team. So I just had a discussion. We're a seasonal business. We're a lot busier in the winter than we are in the summer. Summer's coming. So always about this time of year, we're having some hard conversations. Some shifts are disappearing. Some people are being laid off. It's just the nature of the business. I don't like to do it, but I just don't have the business in the summer to do it. So every year, I literally yesterday wrote on the dry board, guys, this was our revenue in January. This was February. This was March. And this was April. This has been our expenses. Notice how the expenses are going down, but not at the same rate. We can't keep this up, or come July, the expenses are higher. I said, I only know one rule in business. Revenue has to be greater than expenses. And since the revenue's not going to be greater, we got to cut expenses. And I just say that and just be honest with them. That's the reality. If they're shocked or surprised or whatever by that, good. It's time for them to get a wake-up call. This is how the world works, you know?
You know what? While we're talking about this, I'd love to just have you chime in on the discipline of financial awareness or analysis, or many business people are not good at the financial side of the business.
100% agree.
That is common. That's a common thread in I would say most.
Certainly been my
businesses.
experience.
Yeah. So I'd love for you to chime in on any thoughts or tidbits or pointers about if the people who are listening out there, what do they need? What should they go back from a financial perspective? What should they go back and do in their business to really pull out or dissect what's happening in their business financially?
There's a book by Isler called Financial Statements. Everybody who came to my board, they had to read that their first year. It's very well done. It's very simple. You can start at zero and understand your financial statements clearly by the time you get through it. And
Isler?
Yeah, I want to say it's Itzler, Isler. I probably have it sitting here somewhere. Because you have to understand. So a lot of the people who would join my boards, as you can imagine, were doctors, right? Because I'm a doctor, so I attract doctors. And so not all, but most of them. And so obviously, by definition, smart guys, right? When I say guys, I'm including both sexes. Smart guys. And they would come in and I'd say, this is a balance sheet. This is a P&L. This is a cash flow statement. And they would look at me like this. What does that mean? And I said, now listen to me. You took a piece of paper and you put a bunch of squiggly lines on it. And you look at a piece of paper with a bunch of squiggly lines and you can tell me what the heart is doing, right? That's what an EKG is. And you're telling me you can't learn to read these, right? You're taking a piece of paper with squiggly lines and you can tell me everything about the heart. So certainly you can look, here's the thing. If you're scared of financial statements, it's subtraction and addition. There's no calculus. There's no equations. It's just addition and subtraction. It's math. It's just adding and subtracting. It's not hard. We make it so much harder with all these fancy words like P&L and all these fancy words like credits and debits. And we try and fancy it up. But the reality at the end of the day is it's how much comes in minus how much you spend on operating equipment to run your business, minus how much your expenses are to run the business, is the profit that your company makes. But that is not the money you go spend. That's people's real mistake, I think. People look at their P&L. That's the only piece they look at, and they see the bottom line, quote unquote, because it is the bottom line. That's why it's called the bottom line. And it says net income or profit. And they say, oh, that's 200. We made money this month. But you didn't make money because that doesn't include all the stuff. That only includes the stuff on the P&L. If you're going to learn one thing, this is the thing. After that comes all your capital expenses. Those are not on the P&L. So anything you did to improve your business. After that comes all of your principal payments to your loans. The interest payments are on the P&L, but the principal payments are not. And so from that 200 comes your capital expenses, your principal expenses, and then any yah-yah that you take out of the business that isn't a real expense. And then what's left is called free cash flow. And free cash flow is what you get to go spend. But I wish they taught that like that. I wish the P&L said that. I wish it said net income and then it said capital, yah-yah, principal, free cash flow. And it was just stated like that. It would be so much clearer. But instead, what you have to do is take those 3 pieces of paper and figure that out on your own. And so you have a cash flow statement that'll help you through that. And you have a balance sheet that'll help you with that. But your whole goal is to know how much free cash flow did we make this month? That's the real question you're asking, not what was our net profit this month. I think that's the number one lesson. Yeah. So many business owners think net profit is profit. And unfortunately, it's only profit in accounting speak, not in real life.
No, it's true. And we also evaluate businesses based on a formula close to that,
Well,
right?
exactly like that.
EBITDA,
Well,
right?
that
It's
is
like-
it. In fact, it's EBITDA is just those net profit minus some silly things like interest and taxes, right? So it is what we do. And that's perfectly fine for evaluating businesses. But if you're wondering what your business did this month, this quarter, this thing, go the next step. So don't stop at net profit. Look at the other things also and see what you're making in free cash flow. I've made the mistake many times, right? Especially in real estate, it's super easy to do because in real estate, your principal payments are pretty high. And so you can easily get to the end of the month and it's called NOI in real estate because they had to change the language so it sounded different to them. But basically it's the same thing, right? It's what's left at the bottom of the month, but it doesn't include your loan payments. And people look at that and go, wow, our apartment complex made $200,000 this month. Well, no, because your loan was $200,000
or 300,000.
Yeah. But people forget that because it actually says loan in the P&L, but it means interest. So for financial accounting purposes, they separate the interest from the principal. The interest goes on the P&L and the principal goes on the balance sheet. And the reason that happens is because if you sell that piece of property, and the reason we use EBITDA is because if you sell that piece of property, that mortgage doesn't go to the buyer. He'll have his own mortgage or he'll pay cash or whatever. So your mortgage does not involve him. That's why EBITDA subtracts interest off of the P&L and the balance sheet has the mortgage because the buyer of the property or the buyer of the business won't have the debt you have. They'll have their own set of debt.
They'll have a different
set of debt. And that's when it becomes important. But it's really not important in your day-to-day running of the business. Your day-to-day running of the business, none of that matters. I've never thought to myself, gee, I wonder how much I paid in principal this month. That's just never a thing. Yeah.
And what's your before actually we go forward, the book Financial Statements is by Thomas Idelson.
That's what it is.
Yeah. Ittelson. And for anybody who's listening to this, it doesn't matter what size your business is.
The sooner, the better.
The language of business is accounting.
Unfortunately, it's not chocolate.
And it's not. Unfortunately, it's not chocolate. And you got to learn it because the other problem, this is not I'm not bashing accountants, but accountants are not there to give you advice. They are there on your business because they don't know. They're there to document and record essentially what you need to pay the government in taxes. That is really kind of what they're good at. And so if you don't take this in your own hands and you don't understand this, don't count on your accountant to give you all the best advice. And to your point earlier, when you talked about cash flow, cash flow, what do you do with it?
So let me come back to that. Remind me of that, because the thing I wanted to say about what you just said that I think is super important is one of the things I've learned about business, and I teach new business owners this all the time. Listen, you're going to have a banker probably, and you're going to have a CPA/bookkeeper probably both at some point because somebody's got to file your taxes. And the problem with those people and people like those people is they speak the language of business. They speak it very well. They're talking to business owners all day. That's who does most of their loans at the bank. That's who the CPAs are doing their bookkeeping for. But they've never owned a business. They're W-2 employees. I don't know what that's called in Canada. They're W-2 employees who work for a bank, and they always have. But they speak the language of business so well, you would think they know what the hell they're talking about. The problem is they don't know what the hell they're talking about, and their advice is terrible. So be careful who you listen to. When I have 3 kids who are doctors, and when all 3 of them were in pre-med, and they'd come home and say, Dad, do you think I should say? And I said, who told you that? And they'd tell me, I said, was it a doctor? On how to get into med school. Was it a doctor? No. But this, no. Did they go to medical school? No. Did they ever get accepted? No. Then don't listen to them. You're listening to all the people who got rejected, and that's not going to help you. Listen to the people who got in. And so this is that. If you're going to take business advice, take it from business owners. Business owners give great advice. People who think they're pseudo business owners, who wish they were business owners, but they're not, do not give good business owner advice. They're good advisors. We need CPAs for taxes. We need bankers for loans. I'm not cutting any of that down, but they should not give you advice on running your business as your business. And I've learned that over and over. I fell for the whole, especially the bankers. I mean, you know what you need to do, Doc? You really need to take and close that one and do this over here and do that. I'm like, this dude's never made payroll one time. If you've never sat up at 3:00 in the morning, figured out how the hell am I going to make payroll next week, don't give me advice.
It's good. It's a very, very good point. And I think it's a good point, which I continually try to reiterate on this podcast, is go find some mentors. Go find some people who've done it and done it successfully. Not mentors that have done it and failed five times.
And so they wrote a book.
You know, and then they wrote a book or became a consultant. Right. But go find it. You know, find out. You know, from people who are eating their own cooking, and they're successful in it and doing it every day. You'd said remind you about cash flow. What to do with it.
So there's 3 things you can do with cash flow. Free cash flow, and all 3 are okay. You have to decide which of these 3 you're going to do and in what proportion, and it will change over time. One of the things you can do with it is you can leave it in the business. In accounting terms, they call that retained earnings. So you can use it in the business to grow the business. Open another location, hire another employee, do something, keep it in the business. That's one of the things you can do. The other thing you can do is pay taxes. You probably won't have a lot of choice, and I highly recommend that one. And the third thing you can do is you can take it to the house. And do not forget, as Dan Kennedy would remind you, do not forget the entire reason you have this business is so it will make you and your family money. If you lose sight of that, pretty soon it becomes something it's not. It's not your mission. It's not your goal. It's not your passion. It's not your child. It's a vehicle to make your family money. So anybody who tells you should not take money out of your business, don't listen to that person. It's the reason you started your business. And so now there are times when you should put it all back into business. There are times when you should take it all home. And you'll always pay the taxes. But those are pretty much the 3 things you can do with it. And I have been where I've been all 3 of those positions. So but think the reason I include taxes in that is sometimes we forget that and we put it all back in the business, let's say, and then comes tax time. What you don't realize is the IRS, or whatever it's called where you live, the IRS considers that money profit. So you're taxed on it and you put it back in your business. So you don't have it anymore. All of us have fallen for this at some point where you go, how the hell could I owe $50,000? I don't have $50,000. Well, that's what you owe. But there's no way. I didn't take any money home. My CPA says she has this conversation with every single business owner. I didn't take any money to the house. No, you put it back in the business. Yeah. Why would I owe tax on that? Because that's free cash flow. And your choice was an investment, not in the stock market, but an investment back in your business. And that's the same as if you put it in a savings account. And so I think that's easy to forget. So I think the first thing you should do with free cash flow is say, what percentage of this are we going to need to put in to pay in taxes? Put that aside. And then you have 2 categories. And that's how much we're going to take home and how much we're going to put back in the business. And depending on where you're at in your business, where you're at in your life, those 2 things change. So in the beginning, what we did is I did a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So we pay about 33% taxes in business in the United States when it's all said and done. So I basically would say, well, how much free cash flow we have? 1/3 goes in the tax bin, 1/3 goes in the build the business bin, and 1/3 goes to the house.
Right. And then when on the stuff to from the strategy outside of your business, and I know you've done this very successfully. You invested in a lot of real estate. So when you take it to the house, do you invest through the business into real estate, or do you take it to the house and then invest personally into your real estate? And that might vary depending on where you live.
I invested through a different business. So my core business doesn't own real estate. It's operating entity. And then I have a real estate entity that I do real estate in. And so, and within that real estate entity are multiple LLCs because every property has its own LLC for legal purposes, et cetera. But if you want to think about it conceptually, there's an entity that owns real estate and develops real estate, and there's an entity that owns the opco.
And I mean, the point that I'm really trying to make is that, you know, having a cash machine outside of your business over time, this doesn't happen in the first year or the first 5 years, but over time, having a cash machine that you develop outside of your main business, so that if a storm happens and you get disrupted and your business goes away or gets hit by 50%, you've got another machine that is building money, whether that's your
whatever investments you like to do, real estate or another side business or
investing in the stock market,
whatever's your niche, whatever's your thing, and all of them can be successful. You have to decide which one you kind of like. That we talked about this a little bit in the last podcast, but that's the definition of financial freedom. If your main gig went away, how long could you last? That's it, right? So if the main gig, whatever that is for you, went away, how long could you survive? And simultaneously, now you've got this other thing that's going to require some of your time, but you're building an empire. That's what I'm trying to say before, is your one business is not your life. If it becomes your identity. Now, I will admit, the people who've done the very best in the world only had one business. The Bill Gates, the Warren Buffetts of the world only had one business. But the majority of people who've done very well have had multiple streams. Yeah. And I think that's probably the better route for most people, because it's hard to build a multi-billion-dollar business.
Well, and you don't have to have 5 streams.
Right. You have to have a couple.
You need to have maybe one for sure, or 2. And I think, to your point in the other podcast, you kind of said, like, what is it for you? What does financial freedom look like for you? And, you know, and do you have interest in it? Like, do you enjoy, like, I'll give you perfect example is like, we don't have a lot of real estate because I had real estate. That's kind of where I started, actually, in my early years. And I hated having tenants, hated it. So I was like, I'm not doing that because I don't want those phone calls.
Yeah,
I don't want
everybody has to decide their thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've done real estate since I was in my 20s, and I love it to this day. I like being able to go up and kick something and say, I own that. You know, versus if I own some Bitcoin, I don't even know what that means. By the way, I do own some, but I don't know what it means. I'm not savvy enough to really understand the whole model. But if you're talking about financial freedom, I think if this is what we're talking about, I think you have to distinguish between something that pays me money, which increases my cash flow, versus something that I hope is going to increase in value, which does not increase my cash flow, right? So we're on real estate and Bitcoin. Let's just use those as an example. But we could take anything. Bitcoin does not put any money in your pocket. It's never going to until you sell it. Real estate puts money in your pocket every single month and hopefully growing in value at the same time. So one is a cash cow. That's what I call that. The other one is let's buy this and hope that it goes up in value. Now, some real estate, you do that, right? You buy a piece of vacant land knowing that the city's going to come through and put a road, and so it's not providing any cash flow. Just understand, when you buy an asset or an investment of any kind, is this kind of asset I'm buying that I hope to get no cash flow from until we sell it? Or is this something I'm trying to provide cash flow? In my definition, what changed my investment strategy was my definition of wealth. And my definition of wealth was how long can I last? And so most of my investments tend to be cash flow producing investments that pay me on a monthly basis, or at least a quarterly basis.
It's good strategy, man. Like, I mean, and I think again, it's about your vision. Like, what is your, sit down, spend some time, decide what your vision is, and have the discipline to be able to make the financial commitments to whatever decision you make.
I have a buddy who has, he's the Bitcoin guru. He's like literally has a newsletter about it. He's the Bitcoin guy. So I'm only bringing it up because I'm teasing him a little bit. But I always tease him like this. I say, so when you sell it? And he says, well, I'm not selling anytime. I said, then it will never give you anything. Well, what's the point of investing in something that's never going to give you anything? And he said, well, I'll sell when it's $1 million. I said, well, what if that's 30 years from now? Well, then I'll sell in 30 years. Well, then good luck with that. I don't have 30 years left. That's not going to work for me. So, but that's his strategy, and that's perfectly fine. I'm only playing with him, right? That's perfectly fine in his strategy. And by the way, I own a little bit of Bitcoin. So I'm not knocking it.
It's not 80% of your
80%
portfolio.
of my portfolio. 80% of my
Yeah.
portfolio is producing cash. And then I like to gamble and play a little bit, and that's gambling, to me. And so I like to do that, and that's fine too. I will mention gold on here just because I'm sure there's a lot of people right now who are talking about gold. I've thought a lot about gold, silver, coin. And so this is Tim Reynolds' take after reading pretty much everybody's take. I've literally studied this at length. It's a good insurance policy. What do I mean by that? It doesn't put any money in your pocket. Never will, unless you sell it, just like Bitcoin. So people who are the doomsdayers, one day when the currency goes to zero and devalues and gold's the only thing you can spend money on with, well, that's an insurance policy. So do I have gold? Yes. How much do I have? Enough that if that happened, I have enough. But I don't use it as an investment. It's not an investment for me. When I die, my kids will inherit a whole bunch of gold. That's because I'm not buying it as an investment. I'm not hoping it goes up. I'm buying it as an insurance policy. Now, am I a doomsdayer and think all that thing's going to happen? I absolutely do not, and I am not. But I also don't think I'm going to wreck my car and I buy car insurance. I don't think I'm going to light my house on fire, but I have house insurance. So that's how insurance works. That's, to me, different than an investment. And so I think that's the way I think about that. And so when I die, my kids will have a bunch of gold. And I'll probably never use it because I don't think that's really what's going to happen.
Yeah. And neither will they.
And probably neither will they. And Charles Givens, weirdly, was the guy who said, 1978, for when I first started listening to him, an ounce of gold will buy a good quality man's suit, and always has and always will. Well, here we are in 2024, an ounce of gold will buy a quality man's suit.
That's actually very interesting.
Because it's a measure of inflation. So it'll always buy a quality man's suit. People say, well, it's gone up to 3,000. So did the suit.
Yeah, the suit has gone up.
So it's worth the same as it was worth before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
He said that 40 years ago to me, and I've been watching to see if he was right. And so far, he's been spot on.
That's crazy, actually.
Yeah.
So we got onto this whole conversation through financial statements. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you was the discipline of financial statements. What is it? What is your practice when it comes to your business and businesses of the discipline of financial statements?
One day a month is finance day.
1 day a month.
So 1 day a month, the entire day is spent working on financials. And so in my business, I get my financials by the 10th of every month. And sometime between then and the 15th, usually, we have finance day. Started this years ago. And at finance day are the people who I need looking at the financial statements. So I'm my CPA there, I have my CFO, sometimes my banker, and we'll sit in a room and say, here's the financial statements. What do you think of this? What do you think of this? I don't think this is right. How could this possibly be right? Because you find errors, right? And so that's been a tradition now for 20 years. Yeah.
And if you have a smaller business, that might look like, your operations, it could be your bookkeeper. And it could be your manager.
The smartest thing I ever did was I outsourced my CPA, obviously, you know her, Becky. And she's been my CPA for 20 years. And I said to her, what would it cost me to have you come and sit and look at my financial statements with me for a few hours every month? And I paid her to do it back then. And that was the smartest thing I ever did because I did not understand financial statements. And she understood them extremely well. And she taught me. And every month I'd say, what does this mean? Oh, I don't understand this principal versus interest thing. What is this balance sheet versus cash flow? And she would teach me financial statements every single month month in and month out, month in and month out. And even though I'm not that bright, I eventually was able to pick up on some of what she taught, right? You don't have to learn it right away, but then I was able to slowly into it. So I would recommend find someone like that and pay them to look at your financial statements with you every month and teach you the things you don't know. Because even if you go read the book I told you, and I think you should, you're still going to have a bunch of questions that somebody smart like that can help you with.
And so many people look at that as a cost rather than an investment in their education.
Best investment ever.
Yeah, like it's 100%.
I still do it to this day with her there. She's still there every single month.
After 20 years.
Yep. Every month. And back then, I was one of her smallest clients, and now I'm her largest client. And we still do it every month.
And there's probably there's a reason why you're her largest client now.
Yeah, she got rid of all the others.
But I mean, and so actually you tweaked on something there. You get your financial statements from your bookkeeper by the 10th of every month.
From my CFO.
From your CFO.
But bookkeeper, if that's what you have, whoever you have.
Sorry, depending on the size of your business. So do you want to touch base on that? Like the difficulties of that? Because most people do not get that.
Yeah. So I said, I don't take a meeting before 10 o'clock. And I get my financial statements on the 10th of the month. Well, they can only meet at 9 o'clock. I know. So we're going to meet at 10. There's no way to get the financial statements done before the 10th. I know. We'll get them on the 10th. I just kept saying it. And I kept saying it. And nobody would. In fact, on days when there's a holiday on the 10th, my CFO will call me and say, Dr. Reynolds, you realize that the 10th is Saturday. Would it be okay if we give them to you on Monday? I was like, that's fine.
Because, I thought you said I take them Friday.
No, I will. She knows. She thinks that's what I'm going to say. But it's funny that even then, I mean, they know it so much that they're scared not to have them to me by the 10th. And the world had to turn upside down because we're in a medical practice, right? So we have to close out the previous month, which means we have to get all the insurance company stuff. It's a real hassle to get done by the 10th. And so I did believe in the beginning there was no way to make that happen. And I just kept saying, no, we got to, there's got to be 8 cylinders in this Ford car. And I just kept saying it. And by dang, we've had them on 10th of the month, every month now for 10 years. But it's hard for me to run my business when I don't get my financial statements until the 20th. And now I'm looking back at a month that already happened. And by the time I make the changes, now it's going to be the next month that I lost 60 days.
Most people don't get them for 45 days.
And then right? I don't know how you make changes doing that.
Yeah, you can't.
I've gotten mine down now. I'm not recommending this, but I've got mine down now. We do them in real time. I know every single day where we are in our financials. I don't even have to wait till the end. I have no surprise at the end of the month. I already know what's coming, because we do it every single day. That's very complicated.
We do components of ours we do some major components every day, and we do every week. So we'll have we're always watching certain pieces every day.
I think that's the next level. Start with this. Get them by the 10th of the month. Sit down with someone who's smart, who can. If we're talking about somebody who doesn't understand financial statements,
for a lot of these people,
this would be new.
Just get a financial statement.
Get a financial
once a month.
statement. That's what I'm saying. Start there. Don't start jumping into what we're talking about now, because that's way too sophisticated. But do get a financial statement every month. Sit down with somebody who can help you to understand it. Read the book I gave you. That's the start. And once you do that, then you'll start wanting to know more, and that's the whole key. As soon as you're thirsting for that knowledge, then you'll get more. You'll want more. And so then you start tweaking it and getting better and better until you get it where you are, where I am, where we're looking at it all the time. And because I don't like surprises. Don't surprise me at the end of the month. I don't like that. We've both been surprised.
Too many times you're like, holy shit.
Yeah, I don't want that. I would rather know tomorrow.
And it's amazing to me how many people run their business and they get a financial statement once a year when they do their taxes.
Unbelievable.
It's probably greater than 60%. So this is, I think, really an important conversation, and anybody who's listening to it, and you're not getting your financial statements, you really need to figure out why and how you can get them.
And I will say we're overemphasizing the component of finances of all the components we've talked about in the business, but this is because it's also the weakest for most entrepreneurs. And you're going to have to shore up your weakest spot in order to be, because everybody wants to go talk about marketing. Everybody wants to talk about sales. Everybody wants to talk about operations, and nobody wants to talk about finances. So get good at finances and the other stuff will happen.
Well, and it also gives you an indication of where can you spend? If you want to spend more money, like let's cut out of this budget so we can give to more marketing or
Is
product
what we're
development
spending
or
working?
whatever. Yeah. And that's that's now, you're talking deeper analysis, and that's where I think having the parties involved in the business that are controlling some of these numbers need to be in attendance, which then just goes back to what we were talking about, is sharing your financial statements with the people that you work with.
Everybody's working on the same project.
They got to be working. It's like, if they're not, somebody's rowing this way, the other guy's rowing that way. This girl's going,
It'll happen enough anyway. But it helps to stay in line when everybody at least is working on the same thing and trying the same thing. And by the way, it's perfectly okay if they have different ideas of the best way to get there. The way I tell my team is, look, I don't mind how passionate you are. You can jump up on the table, scream, yell, as long as we're all passionate about the best way to get us to where we're going. As soon as the passion becomes about what's best for you or what's best for your department, that's where it gets off the track. We all have to be talking about what's best for the mission. And we could disagree about the best way to get where we're going, as long as we're all talking about the best way to get where we're going. It's not about secretly about how to take care of me better.
Yeah, it's actually funny because we were talking about this last night. Actually, you were talking about mission, team, and then self. Do you want to just chime in a little bit on that?
Yeah. So one of our special forces concepts was the most important thing is the mission. The next most important thing is our team. I was on an A team, and the next most important thing is me, and in that order. And as soon as that order gets out of line in any kind of way, you end up with problems. As soon as I start putting myself over my team, then I'm not a good team member anymore. I'm now a selfish team member, and my needs are more important than the team's needs. Or if I start putting myself over the mission, or if I start putting the team over the mission. And this one is really tricky, because if you're a head of a department in your company, I'll give you an example. When I started in the emergency department, I was the medical director for Level 2 Trauma Center for 10 years. And I am all about, because I come from an SF background, I'm all about taking care of your team. And so I was supportive of my team, helping my team. And then I'd go upstairs and have conversations with administration of the hospital, and I was protecting my team, et cetera, et cetera. And one day this came to a head when I was having a problem, and I realized that I was doing this. I was putting my team ahead of the mission. The mission of the hospital was way more important than my ER. And so you can get caught up in that because you think you're doing the right thing, protecting your people, if you will. But when that gets ahead of the mission, right, you can't take an A team and put it ahead of the Army, right? So that order is very important. What is our mission? Then our team, and then me. And I think that anytime in your business or anywhere else that gets out of order, in your family, right? The most important is our family mission. And the next most important thing is our family. And the next most important is me, in that order.
Yeah. And I love the way you were talking about it last night was just, when you have, if you own a business and you have, employees, and you will have employees, or you will have team leaders who are going to either put self and team before mission, it's a great way
to put it back in line.
To put it back in line. It's a great coaching mechanism. Like it was really dawned on me. It's like, this is a great way to frame this conversation versus, most people go, listen, you're being, really selfish, or you're, that's not the way to, you've really got to frame it as in, here's what we're looking at.
Well, I came into just this week. That's what you and I are talking about. One of my team members who's the head of a department did exactly that. She's like telling me how great all of her team is. And I know she's not she's exaggerating because she's trying to protect them. And I said, listen, I know what you're doing. You're trying to protect your team. And she said, well, that's what good leaders do. I said, not if they're putting them ahead of the mission. I said, are you more dedicated to your team, or are you more dedicated to the mission? If the answer is your team, you got your priorities wrong. Because as a leader, your job is to support the mission and evaluate your team and make sure they're supporting the mission, and now support your team. And that it dawned on her too. She was like, you're absolutely right. That's exactly what I'm doing. I did not realize that.
And if, the other side of that is that it is a possibility that as the owner of the business, you have not expressly clarified what the mission is, or coached it, or trained it, or reinforced it over time, or are not filtering back and forth to it on a consistent basis, so that people start to lose sight of what the mission is. And if they don't know what the mission is, their team will become the mission.
Yes. And inside every company, there's multiple teams, right? So it becomes sales versus marketing, accounting versus billing versus the accounting, and that's a fun rivalry as long as it's fun. But when it becomes not fun and they start putting themselves above the mission of the entire organization, then it's your job to restate the mission in terms that everybody understands, and so everybody can get on board in supporting the mission.
Yeah, and that's why one of the reasons, like, just you say this, it's like in our operations meetings, we always have somebody from the sales department. Usually it's the team leader, or the sales manager, or whatever the position is, involved in the operations meetings, because they have to be represented to understand what the full mission is. And if you start to silo those meetings, you can run into that kind of problem.
Well, every business that I know of over promises on the sales and under promises on the operations. It's a ubiquitous problem across all businesses, because the sales guy's job is to sell. So of course, without lying, they over exaggerate. And the operations people is to bring the new customer back down to reality, which is the exact wrong message. Exact wrong message. So the better you can align those two things, the better everybody does, especially the customer. We've all been the customer in that business. Once they make the sale, they're whining and dining you right up till you sign the contract. And you're like, where'd they go?
Where the hell are they?
I haven't heard from those guys in 3 weeks. We've all been there, because they got confused about team over mission.
Yeah, it's perfect. I'm curious. We were like literally into 2 hours here of a conversation.
All right, wrap it up.
But like, what do you have any final thoughts when it comes to business, what you've learned, what you've experienced, what you'd like to share with people?
I heard Elon Musk say something that just really struck me. And it was this. They said, what do you tell people who want to go into business? And he said, he thought, how he does. He says, thinks. And he goes, don't. I said, what? He said, don't. It's way harder than you thought it was going to be. You're going to be staying up a lot more nights than you thought you would. You are going to have financial distress you can't even imagine. And if you have to do it, then do it. I think that's great advice. It's not for everybody. Most people should not do it. It sounds great to everybody, right? Oh, everybody should do it. No, everybody should not do it. It's not for the weak of heart. It's not for those who are not willing. If you go, you know what? I love business, but I hate financial statements. Then you don't even understand what you're talking about. You have to love that part of it. You have to love all of it. And you can't love part of it and be successful at all of it. And so I think there's some of us within our DNA that we just couldn't do anything else. That's just what I have to do. Can you imagine me working for somebody? What a horrible nightmare that would be for that poor son of a bitch.
Especially now.
Yeah. I took him to heart. I said, I got to go build my old ballpark. I don't like ballpark rules. I'm going to go build my own. And if that's who you are, and that's what you have to do, then you have to go all in and say, then I have to become the best version of me who could do that, and focus on becoming the best version of you rather than focusing on strategies. I think but people do way too much. So many people come to my board and say, hey, what's the best strategy for me to take my business to this? Work on you, dude. You don't even know how to read your financial statements yet. Quit talking about that. So you have to go to work on you, and I think, and learning these skill sets we've been talking about today, not just finances, but the skill set of being able to talk to people and motivate people. And look, the best business owners I know are really, really, really good with people. They're not tyrants. That's just in the movies. You can only be a tyrant in your business for about a minute, and then you're going to go out of business. So they're really, really good with people. You're going to have to learn people skills. Well, I don't like people skills. Then don't go into business. I mean, so I would say he was right. To most people, I'd say don't do it. But if you have to, if it's something's gnawing at you and you have to do it, then you have to go all in on it.
Yeah. You could own a painting business.
Yes.
And you are the painting
You can own
business.
a job. Yeah. You can own a job. If you want to own a job and you got two other guys and you and them and you just go do a thing, you can do that. But if you want to build a real business, if you want to, I'm not saying that's not a real business. That was a stupid thing to say. If you want to build a bigger business that's going to involve you not being the painter, you're going to have to fall in love with the other skill sets.
Let me ask you just this question, because it's an oxymoron to end a business podcast with don't buy a business, or don't become don't get a business.
You shouldn't have invited me.
Thanks, Elon. but if you are compelled, what would you say are the things that I wrote a couple things down that you were just talking about, but what would you say are the things that if you were compelled to go out and build a business beyond just you and your bulldozer or your painting, business or whatever, where you're going to actually hire people, you're going to have a list of clients. This is, they may or may not know you. It's not about you. It's about owning the business. And you want to, I'll use the word leverage, for your, and you talked about it earlier, the reason to own a business is for your life, for your family, for your, because if you're doing it, because it makes sense in a lot of ways, you're right. It doesn't make a lot of sense, right? It's like,
it's way harder than you thought it was going to be.
God damn, it's so hard.
That's it.
It's so hard.
Most people can't do it because it's why 90% fail. It's not because they're out of capital, which people say. It's because the owner couldn't figure out a way to get capital.
Mm-hmm. That's it. Yep. So if you're compelled, what are the things that you need to have in place? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the one I heard earlier today was, you said it, 40 million. I want to practice medicine the way I want to practice medicine. You had a vision.
Yep. I think you create a vision. What would I like that to look like? How do I live into that? How do I fake it till I make it? How do I surround myself with mentors? How do I surround myself with mentors and friends who are doing what I'm doing? So I live in a small town, as you know, and not egotistically or any other thing. If in my small town, I'm usually the smartest guy in the room. That does not serve me. So I had to go find friends and mentors outside of my small town. So I fly somewhere else or get on the call with somebody else who's outside of my circle so that I'm not the smartest guy in the room anymore. So, because I need to be surrounding myself with people smarter than me. So if you are the smartest person in the rooms that you're in, then you're in the wrong room. Go get another room where you feel stupid, where you're like, wow. I remember I got asked to be on a bank board of a publicly traded bank, and I was in my 30s, and I got to my first board meeting, and nobody there was younger than 70 years old. And they all own mega businesses. I'm not even sure how they asked me to be on this board. And I literally sat there just so intimidated, and then I thought, this is the room that I need to be in. And man, I learned so much from those guys over the next 7 years. Every month I'd meet with those old men, and they just taught me so much. Just find a room like that. Go find a room where you're the dumbest guy there, and you can just listen to the wisdom of the other guys. That would be my advice.
Yeah. I'm going to add a couple from the podcast that you're doing, from this conversation. Work on you. Be prepared. 100%. If you're not prepared to work on you, then don't do it. Like I love that. Like if you said it earlier, your business is about as big as you think it should be or could be.
If you want to make your business better, you become better.
You got to become better. I love that so much.
It's the only way.
You also said you have to be really good with people. If you don't want to solve problems and work with others and help them, and you have an expectation, I'll say, well, maybe I'll just use the phrase, trade your expectations, what you expect from people, to what you appreciate they do for you, that changes the psychology of your approach. And if you don't have that, you're going to be freaking miserable. Somewhere you have to find, because that's the people who are walking around like, fucking employees are assholes. And look, some of them are assholes. Some of them are assholes. Like it's true.
Yep. And sometimes I am.
Sometimes I am too.
Yeah. And that's okay. But as a general concept, that you're exactly right. So you think about it. You and I are really, really good friends. Been friends for a long time. What are your expectations of me? Exactly. That's why we're friends. The thing that makes us friends is I don't have any expectations.
I do have one expectation of you: to jump in the pool with me when I am digging a fucking hole.
Yeah. So
when I've crossed the line, I need somebody to cross.
But
it with
even
me.
then, it's appreciation when it happens.
Right.
It is, right?
It's
There's
true.
no expectation. The reason that we have a hard time getting along with our employees is because we have what we call expectations, and with what we have with our friends is appreciation. And so I think you're right. As much as you have to have standards, we already said that, you get what you tolerate, all that. But as much as you can convert that into appreciation, the more successful I think you're going to be. And I forget it all the time because I'm pretty hardcore when it comes to expectations. But I'm learning and have learned over the years exactly what you said. The more I can walk up to somebody and say, man, I just cannot believe you're here for me. And I really appreciate all the years you've put in and things you've done. That's very different than coming out and saying, hey, you know what my expectations are. I expect you to meet them. That's not going to work long term.
And I think that's the same as kids, right? You know, if you have a bunch of expectations of your kids and you are focused on that and not what you appreciate about them, you're going to have a real tough time with them growing up. But I also think too, and I'm going to add this to the business list just because it dawned on me, which was, you also have to, you can still appreciate people, but you can have hard conversations.
You have to.
And if you don't want to have hard conversations with people, don't go into business.
Do not do it. That's my number one thing I say to people all the time. I just don't like confrontation. Then don't be a leader. Get a job where you do not have to be a leader. You don't have to own the business to be a leader. But if you're going to be a leader of any kind and lead any group of people, you have to be willing to say what needs to be said. Nothing happens until the unspoken gets spoken. And you have to be willing to say what needs to be said, or it will just, you cannot lead. Because what separates the leaders from their people is their ability and willingness to do that.
It's so true. And I do think there's a degree of like, if you don't say what needs to be said, you have to question whether you care about that other person, because they'll never grow if you don't. And leaders go first. So you've got to be able to put yourself out there in a position where, you know, you care enough to have a hard conversation.
100%.
Yeah. Those are 6 or 7 things. I got vision, mentors, education, find a room that you're not, you know, you don't be the biggest fish in the pond. Work on you, be prepared to work on you. Really good, be good with people. Question your assumptions is another one, I think. I don't know if we talked about that one, but have a mechanism that allows you to question the assumptions that you're making. If you want to be right,
then be right.
Yeah, but
look, do you want to be right or do you want to be rich? Because you can't be both. That's it. I'm happy to be right, but I can't be right and rich.
That's exactly right. And have the hard conversations. Dude, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having
5
me.
hours of podcasting today.
That's a lot of podcasting.
That's a lot of podcasting.
You don't. My hourly rate is high, so
the check is in the mail, brother. Listener, guys, thanks so much for listening. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Tim Reynolds. I always forget to do this. How do people find you?
Go to livingeveryminute.com. That's my website. And if you want to see my business is gohce.com. Not that you do anything there. It's a medical business, but you kind of see what we do and how we do it. Maybe you can get some ideas for your business and those kind of things. If I can serve you in any way, please let me know. You can email me if you want to right there on my website, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Yeah, dude, you're so gracious. I appreciate you being here. Thank you for number one, thank you for your friendship. I love you, man. And I appreciate your time. I'm so glad we got to do this in person. And guys, thanks so much for listening. I don't know how we're going to split all this stuff up, but stay tuned, and we will see you again next week. Appreciate you listening. Thanks, brother.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.